Hello, my Jets fans. It took a long time to get here, but the 2022 NFL Draft is officially in the books for the New York Jets, barring something crazy and them coming back into the later rounds tonight. And it appears by all accounts that the Jets are done with this draft. The 2022 draft that has been billed as a franchise changer lived up to the hype and, in my opinion, exceeded the hype for New York Jets fans. And we have to remember how long in the making this was. This journey didn't start in January. Oh, no, my friends. This started over a year and a half ago on a fateful day when the Jets announced that they had dealt Jamal Adams, arguably the face of their franchise at the time, to the Seattle Seahawks for a first, a third, and a future first. That added to the anticipation for this upcoming draft and for the next two drafts. Then, before last year's draft, the Jets traded what they thought at the time was their franchise quarterback in Sam Darnold in a deal to get 3 picks, including a high 2 and a 4th round pick from the Carolina Panthers. And while there's still questions about Zach Wilson, it does look like the Jets made the right call to move off of Sam Darnold. Jets fans then went through a rough season this past year, going game after game, watching the development. And while there were exciting moments, it was fun seeing the kids develop on this team. There was plenty of times, and you guys can admit it in the chat, you can admit it in the comments, but let's be honest, how many of us were kind of going to Tankathon and checking scores? How many times were we kind of sitting there with a grin when we saw Seattle would lose a game and then lose another game and then lose another game? And then we saw, after a great start in Carolina, them go on a losing streak. And when the dust settled at the end of the season, the Jets sat there with 4 picks in the top 40, including 2 top 10 picks, which at the time seemed nearly impossible. And after today, it seems like the wait, and boy, Jet fans, it was a long wait. It was a wait. I mean, this has been a year, well over a year and a half in the making. But the Jamal Adams trade, the Sam Darnold trade has officially closed, and the New York Jets and Joe Douglas have put this team in a position where I have not been this excited about this team for a long time, because not only have they gotten significantly better, they have infused this roster with young playmakers and young building blocks that you are excited about. And Joe Douglas, say what you want about him, say what you will about his conservative free agency approach, but I feel confident in him leading this organization forward. And while you might have questions about Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson, there will be one answer this year. It will not be on the Jets failing Zach Wilson. You could say the Jets failed Sam Darnold. They failed to put the pieces around him. But when you look at what they have put around Zach Wilson over the last 2 drafts compared to other quarterbacks in his own draft class, the Jets have done more for this quarterback than anyone else has for a second-year quarterback. They have moved heaven and earth. They have put him with weapons, a great running game, a great offensive line, a lot of depth, and a defense that will look to be greatly improved. Okay, that's enough for the opening monologue, guys. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you for sticking with me for the last couple of months as we've broken down countless draft options, countless mock drafts, countless situations, have gone through the ups and downs. I mean, this has been quite the offseason. I mean, we've had the highs of free agency. We had the lows of the missing the Tyreek Hill trade. And looking back now, ATC Ace asked the question, do you regret the Tyreek Hill trade? At this moment in time, I think that the Jets would look back at this and say, yes, Tyreek Hill would be an unbelievable playmaker, and having him would be a key difference maker on this offense. But we can't overlook the fact that with those picks, the Jets got one of the top 3 pass rushers, in my opinion, in this draft, or at the very least, a top 4. They ended up with the number 1 running back in this draft. And on top of that, they added what I believe is the tight end with the highest ceiling in the entire draft. This draft was unbelievable. Now, day 3, we'll get to in a bit because the Jets was a short day for Jet fans. I thought that this could be a long day. The beat writers were even commenting on, but the Jets made their 2 picks and called it a day. I thought that the Jets would do a couple strategies. We talked about it yesterday, last night after the round 2 and 3. I said, I have a feeling that they could go 3 options. Take the picks where they are, use one of the force to go up to the top to get a player that fell, or what I thought would be most likely, and Joe Douglas proved me wrong. I thought Joe Douglas was going to trade back, propel back, get as much draft capital. But what this tells me is the Jets not only feel that they have done a good job with their scouting with free agency, but they feel confident for the first time in how long can I say this? The Jets feel confident that they actually have depth at the position. Like you look at this Jet roster, you can make the case, yes, they might not be as high in talent as some other teams in the league, but you can't argue that the Jets have done everything in their power to make sure this team does not have a glaring hole and made sure that there is a lot of depth. Can we finally put the 2015 to 20 BS behind us? I believe we can. I mean, the 2018 to 20, I mean, the Adam Gase era is officially dead. Gang JJ was like getting a surprise tax refund. Absolutely. Hi, Rich. Can't stay long, but this was an amazing draft. Love the picks. Next, I expect Jody to sign a quality undrafted free agency. And Spin Max Dave, thank you for that because Monday morning, 10 a.m. I'm sorry, guys, tomorrow can't do it, but 10 a.m. we're going to look at undrafted free agency. We're going to talk about it. And I think it's a very important part of the draft. And there's 2 big reasons why I'm excited to do this. One, I'm just a draft nerd. Actually, 3 reasons. One, I'm a draft nerd and I love every part of this. Like if you've watched this channel, you know I love this offseason process. I love the process of the draft. But the 2 reasons it impacts the Jets is number 1, I believe that one of the reasons that the Jets didn't trade back is they have a couple of guys circled who they believe they can get in the undrafted free agency pool. But I also will have to say Joe Douglas has done a really good job of finding 1 or 2 diamonds every year. I mean, the first year on the job got Bryce Huff, someone that I had as a 3rd round grade as a pass rusher, and he's become a very good rotational pass rusher for this team. Last year was Brandon Eccles, who they got as an undrafted free agent. So I'm excited to see who they look at because he also did, like, you look at the Jets, they brought in a lot of corner prospects that were 6th to 7th round grades. 2 or 3 of them probably hit the undrafted free agency market. And the Jets have a good advantage over a lot of these really great teams because the Jets, even though they've done an unbelievable job building these rosters, if you have a talented undrafted free agent, he's probably going to want to go to a team. This is like the opposite usually. Like usually players, every other situation, they want to go to the best team that they can. With undrafted free agents, they're looking for opportunities. And the Jets, I believe, can convince them, especially Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, that they can have an opportunity. And you've seen them have had undrafted free agents not only play, but make an impact. Friggle D liking the Max Mitchell pick. We will get to the picks in a second. Aaron Rodgers must wish he got treated like Wilson at least 1 year. I intend on the Jets being active in the undrafted free agency market. Absolutely. What's the soonest minute JD can start the signing undrafted free agents? See, that's going to be interesting because I do wonder how that's going to be impacted this year. Usually, I believe it's right after the draft. I do think there's a bit of a grace period. To be honest with you, I don't exactly know when the deadline officially starts. I know it's been kind of screwy the last couple of years because of COVID and everything, although now we're kind of supposed to be back to normal. But I can tell you that the process has already likely begun in terms of you will have teams getting an idea of who's going to be there and calling guys. Like I believe right now, especially with the 6th and 7th round picks. And here's the other interesting fact of this too is for some of these players now, it's probably even better to go undrafted because when you get to the 6th and 7th round, yes, it's great to be drafted. Yes, it's great to have that guarantee of least being on the roster of a star of a camp. Yes, it's great to say, like, you can look back in history and say, yes, I was drafted by a team. But in some of these cases, these players might be better off if they slip and then they can basically determine what is their best option. Like, where can they go? Like, where are they still able to go and make an impact and go to teams that they feel that they can play with? I'd keep an eye on Jesse Lukita. He's still on the board from Penn State. That's a guy the Jets have worked out. He'd be someone I keep an eye on. Right now, we're in about the sixth round. He's definitely someone I believe the Jets, they've had him in for a workout. Another interesting prospect, I actually had the Jets drafting him, and I'd be shocked if he's there, but he would be my number one priority. He'd be Kellen Deesh, the offensive tackle out of Arizona State, 6'7", 303 pounds. Really good athlete. Reminds me kind of what the pick they made earlier today, but can play the tackle positions. Really light on his feet. Fits this zone scheme incredibly well, but it would help you get another good one. And I get Vernon McKinley is another option out there. I mean, there's some pretty interesting prospects. One prospect that is out there, I doubt he makes it, but one prospect I would be interested in is Justin Ross, the wide receiver out of Clemson. I mean, he's 6'4", 205 pounds. And look, his career has been hampered by injuries. I get he had a foot surgery in 2021. He's not an elite speed receiver. He's not a burst receiver, but he's a big body on the outside. He's got decent route running. And I also think a lot of it too is like if the medicals clear out on him, I take a shot. And even if they don't, I know it's a bit of a risk, but it's hard to get guys that might, if they were healthy, would be probably high second, third round picks as undrafted free agents. I don't see why you wouldn't take a shot on him. He could be a good outside receiver. And I think a lot of the production went down last year because Clemson was just a mess last year without Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the offensive production just took a massive impact. They were not the same football team. So that is another reason why I would be aggressive out there and try to bring him in. There's a lot of good prospects, and it always seems like there's a couple of prospects that every single season slip through the cracks and end up in the undrafted free agent Marco. Kev Chatta, would you have picked Darian Kinner instead of Max Mitchell? So let's get to my thoughts on the day. Well, let's shift to day 3 picks. Again, guys, new to the channel, make sure you're subscribed. If you know anyone that loves draft content, let them know. We want to get as many people here as possible. I understand, like, yeah, Justin Ross, I understand with the spinal fusion, but still, I would at least take a flyer. The worst thing is the Jets come, he doesn't make the roster as an undrafted free agent. So I don't see. I mean, look, take the risk. But here are my thoughts on this day. I do believe that the Jets were going to be aggressive today, and Joe Douglas has set a precedent because I think in the last 2 drafts, there's been this misconception that he just likes to trade back. He goes for a little bit more of the conservative approach. He just wants to stockpile picks. And again, he had a lot of picks this year to work with. But at the end of the day, he ended up making more trades up, ended up with fewer draft capital than he had coming into the day, but he made it count. So coming into day 4, to be honest with you guys, if you were on the show last night, you knew who I wanted first. And my thought process was I really wanted Perrion Winfrey, the D tackle of Oklahoma. I had a low first round grade on him. I thought he'd be unbelievable on this team, especially at the interior defensive line. And he was just tantalizingly close. Like he slipped through the first few picks, but then the Browns nabbed him, I believe, at 108 or 109, which was like 2 or 3 spots to the Jets. I just remember tweeting and cursing at the time, like, damn, we were so freaking close to him. So then when it came time to the pick, to be honest, I was a little surprised. I thought Kinnard would be a little bit more in play, but both these picks had something in common. They were all in the Senior Bowl. And I've been stressing this for months on this channel. Like, if there's a guy at the Senior Bowl, look for the Jets to draft him. Like, you see it, like, basically since the first 2 picks, the underclassmen, every pick the Jets had in this draft was at the Senior Bowl. Jermaine Johnson was at the Senior Bowl. Rutgers at the Senior Bowl. Actually, no, Breece Hall wasn't at the Senior Bowl. That's my apologies. But, I mean, you saw like the 3 big playmakers, but then you looked at everyone else, especially today, both prospects were at the Senior Bowl. Jets got firsthand view on him, on these guys. But I did like the pick today. And when the Jets made the selection, I was like, okay, this is a Joe Douglas guy, Max Mitchell, the offensive tackle of the Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns. First of all, Duke Merriweather, guys, so that gets him bonus points. The Jets love those offensive linemen. Duke Merriweather, of course, the guy who trains Mekhi Becton. Tell me if this sounds like someone that, like, if this is not a Joe Douglas guy, versatile tackle that can play multiple positions. He even played guard at one point, but can play left and right tackle. Made 37 starts. Joe loves his guys that can start. Uh, Tested well athletically, more agile, very good run blocker, 95 PFF grade, one of the highest PFF grades this year. Look, like, if he was in a regular scheme, he probably struggle more, but with his quick lateral agility and his quick feet, he fits this zone blocking scheme. And I believe this is a guy who, given the Jets tackle situation, is a high value piece because number one, he's a swing tackle. If the Jets need him to fill in for 2 or 3 games at a time, could he hold up? We'll see, but it gives them that option. And the other thing too is if they can develop him, and the Jets coaching staff has done a very good job with developing players, could he be a potential starter? I mean, the Jets feel confident they have one of the best guard combos in the league. They feel that they have emerging an offensive lineman and Elijah Vera Tucker. But if George Fant, I know they talked an extension. If they can't extend George Fant, does this give him an option in case George Fant leaves? This Mekhi Becton doesn't work out the way some people hope. Is this a backup plan potentially? Like, I see him kind of as Cameron Clark was a couple years ago in that first draft of Joe Douglas, where he drafted a guy in the fourth who offered offensive line versatility. Now with Clark, he didn't have the athleticism that Mitchell does. Mitchell can easily play the left and the right tackle spot. He can go up against some of the speed rushers. What Clark struggled with was the speed. Like, he really was just going to be a versatile interior offensive lineman, maybe the center guard combos. But of course, the devastating injury last year in training camp unfortunately ended his career early. So I like this. I know a lot of people, like, one of the complaints on Jet Twitter. Look, there really wasn't a lot of, you had a great Jets draft, but there really wasn't any complaints on Twitter from anyone, even experts. Like, like, there's a lot of experts, especially in some of the national media, that if there was a chance to rip a Jet pick, oh God, they would have loved it. But they everyone was like, okay, A plus, absolutely great draft. So I love this pick. Now the surprise pick came with Michael Clemons because he does look like a Joe Douglas type of player, but then he also doesn't look like. So this is why he reminds me of a Joe Douglas player. Uh Experience. He's played a couple years in college, became a big star this year. Physically great traits. And Joe Douglas even said in the press conference he has him as like a first or second round talent. And talking to talent evaluators, you look like most people had him like with a second or third round grade. You're getting someone in the top of the fourth round as an edge pass rusher, especially at that size, over 6'5". If he does it correctly, could be maybe a developmental starter. 11 sacks last year. But unlike a lot of Joe Douglas picks, like, Joe Douglas to me took a swing here. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, if you're going to swing in the NFL draft, swing big. And he did swing big here. And it's a position where I feel that he feels comfortable. Like, if he hits, this could be one of the steals of the draft. If he misses, they've put the Jets in a position where it's not going to kill them. And what do I mean? Well, Clemens has had 3 big issues that really work against him in the draft. 2 are a lot bigger than the others, in my opinion. The first one, which to me isn't the biggest deal, but for a lot of people, it does turn people off, is he's 25 years old. He's going to be 25 at the start of this year, older prospect because he went to JUCO for 2 years, then transfer. He's basically been transferring up. He's played like 6 years of college football, finally ending with the Aggies at Texas A&M. But the other thing, too, that is alarming is has had injury history, has had durability issues. This was really his first full healthy year. But the other big two is he was arrested twice in 3 months in 2021, including one with a handgun, another one with a falsified license. I mean, not crazy crimes, but still, they were concerned. And they asked Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, were they concerned about this? And they said, like, this is, again, one of the values of the Senior Bowls, because they had so much time with these players, is, look, we vetted him. We vetted the medicals. We thought the medicals cleared out. We think this is an ascending player. Joe Douglas was adamant saying, like, this is a first or second round talent. And you watch his tape, there's a lot of wow moments with his tape. Like, you saw Jeff Ulbrich and the reaction in the Jet room when they drafted this guy. Like, there was a ton of excitement. So they clearly see something here. And it's something too where if it hits, it's great. If they miss, I don't think, like, you look, the Jets have the way this Jet draft has gone, even if some of these players are talented, but I feel they have a high enough floor where they're still going to be at least good NFL pros. I don't see any guy that's really going to be a disappointment until day 3. A lot of it, like, we'll have to see how Mitchell develops, but I feel like at the very least he can be a solid backup. But Clemons is in a situation too where the Jets have put themselves in a position like, okay, let's take a big swing here. Let's take it someone that is being undervalued that we think we get higher. And to his credit, Joe Douglas did this before for a different player, but it worked out pretty damn well. And it is Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall was like Clemons, had a big injury. Unlike he had the big injuries last year, which really pushed him down. But Hall had a bit of the injury history. A lot of teams had a second round grade, but because of the injury history, they bumped him down all the way to like a 5th round pick. And the Jets ended up getting him in the 5th round, and they made sure the medicals cleared. He's looked pretty good. I mean, for a 5th round pick, he looks like a really good value pick for this New York Jets team. So because of his history on some of these later picks, and especially the secondary players, like I know the secondary is different than the pass rush, but I will say this: the day 3 players for Douglas have been pretty decent. I mean, we kill him for the 2020 draft, but you look at the Jets draft history, he's done a pretty good job on day 3, which is, let's be honest, it's the hardest day of the draft. I understand that Braden Mann might be a little bit of hit or miss for some people, but I mean, the Jets found a part of that draft. Now, that first draft, you can throw out basically James Morgan and Michael Pirine. But again, Pirine was also drafted for a very different system. But I believe Cameron Clark would have been a decent player or a good backup until he got injured. I mean, they got Bryce Hall on that day. And last year, they were able to get Michael Carter. They got Sherwood. They got both Michael Carters, Jason Pinnock, Hamza Nasruddin, Brandon Eccles, and Jonathan Marshall. So my first thoughts with this pick was I was a little disappointed because I really like Kennard, who was the center and guard. And with him, I felt you'd get a good interior backup guy and someone that could be your eventual starting center after next year, which to me would have been a little bit better because the Jets need to also plan a little bit ahead. I think they've done a very good job of it, but I thought the center position could have been something that they addressed. One of the big things that the Jet fans, I've seen the reaction for this Jets and is the interior defensive line and the linebacking position. So let me address each of those. And then also talk a little bit about the amount of hedges the Jets freaking have, which is insane, and how that could impact them and maybe what they could now do with the remaining free agency period. But what I believe the Jets feel, especially looking at a lot of the draft day visits that they had, and some of the draft day visits are guys that are still on the board, but are likely going to be there in the undrafted free agency period. Will Allen, the cornerback from Columbia. Now, I'm doing this at a time and the draft's still going on, so these guys may have gotten picked, but these are guys that could be sitting there potentially. Percy Butler, Darren Bland, BJ Baylor, Will Allen. Lukita was still on the board when I looked at this. Tasir Mack will be a stretch, but he's someone that they had it for a private workout. Bo Melton, I doubt gets the undrafted free agency period. Pierre Strong, Brand Smith have been drafted. But Demetrius Taylor is an interesting one because they were at his pro day. He's the defensive tackle from Appalachian State. I don't think he gets drafted. But I also believe part of the reason that the Jets weren't looking at the interior defensive line is for 2 reasons. Number one, I think they're higher on Jonathan Marshall than a lot of people think. They kind of used last year for Jonathan Marshall as a redshirt year. They still have Sheldon Rankings. I know they're very high on him. And the other factor, too, is the Jets have not only depth, but a stupid amount of depth on the defensive line to the point where I'm kind of wondering if we're going to see by the end of training camp, one of these guys traded for a draft pick. And that's one of the benefits of drafting well is if you get such a surplus, you can maybe flip someone for a pick. We saw it last year with Chris Herndon at the tight end position. But I mean, this is just the defensive line right now, the members of the Jets defensive line. Carl Lawson, Quinton Williams, John Franklin Marshall, Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, Jacob Martin, Sheldon Rankin, Solomon Thomas, Vinny Curry, Michael Clemons, and Jabari Zuniga. Now, out of that group, Zuniga, like the Jets released him at one point last year. He was able to come back through waivers, but I feel Zuniga's basically done. If the Jets could get anything for him, they'll try. I doubt they get anything. Clemons will be interesting. How he does in training camp. Solomon Thomas, I think the Jets really like. They'll use him and John Franklin Myers interchangeable. I mean, Sal said they'll use Franklin Myers inside on passing downs, but Thomas, I believe, is going to be there because he offers the versatility to play inside and outside. Bryce Huff is someone they really love in the building, but if this pick really plays great, it might give them a really good, valuable asset. And if the Jets have so many pass rushers and like a need comes up, like they lose a corner early, there's a potential safety they could get, maybe a linebacker. Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to flop one of these backup edge rushers. But Sheldon Rankins, I doubt. Jacob Martin probably is going to be tough to make the team now, but we'll see what happens throughout the process. Vinny Curry is the weird one for me because Curry, I'm really curious to see what happens with him. Because with Curry, I could see a couple of scenarios. Number one, he is coming back to football, but I do wonder at his age, like if he gets to camp and it's just if he can still go and if he can still play at a high level. If he can, he offers a great veteran leader on that defense, but you wonder what shape he's going to be in. Let's see. Mitchell fits the zone scheme really well. No, with Kennard, I would say like not to be the tackle, but be a guard. Justin Ross will never be the same. I wanted to trade down for O-line, Zach Tom and Brand Smith. Like Kev, I agree with that. Like I really believe they're going to do that. But when you look at what the Jets did today, I mean, I said last night they could have drafted, the punters today, and I think it would have still been an A+ draft. But you look at the Jets today. I mean, this whole draft has had a common theme, which is the first draft and really the last draft and the last two free agencies have been about laying the foundation to a point where the Jets now are looking for the best players and players that are going to put them over the top. And that's what the theme of this draft was. It was playmakers. It was getting players that can make plays and guys that can be difference makers in football games. And you saw that today on day 4. They addressed probably their biggest glaring need first, which was getting a valuable tackle who can play multiple positions, can play both tackle positions, and is someone that if he is called into action his rookie year, might get overwhelmed a little bit, but probably at least gives you something to hold down the fort for a couple games if you need it. But you also got another pass rusher. You can never have too many great pass rushers, especially in the scheme. And somewhere where most people say a 3rd-round grade, but if Joe Douglas is saying he has a 1st or 2nd-round grade on this kid, like, let's be honest, if the Jets had a top 30 board, he's definitely in the top 30 on that board, and you do wonder if he's a top 25 player potentially on the Jets board. Now, every board is different. Every GM sees it differently. Every front office sees it differently. Every coach sees it differently, how they evaluate players compared to, like, what we that cover the draft rate them at. I thought the talent is clearly there. Like, if there were no red flags and he was a year or two younger, he could easily have been a 1st-round pick, especially when you watch the game film, because he didn't just get 11 sacks. He was getting 11 sacks in the SEC, and he was doing it against really good offensive lines and doing it on a consistent basis. So there's a lot of clips out there, too, where he hits the quarterback or gets the quarterback, and they're able to just throw it away. But one game he dominated was the LSU film. Like, he went into LSU with 3.5 sacks. Like, he was a great player. So you saw tendencies again, too, with Douglas, where a lot of these players, too, like he got a lot of guys, especially in the meat of this draft. He looked for a lot of kids that were high-end prospects, that were guys that were outside of Mitchell. Some of these guys were highly recruited. But let's see. Looking at some of the questions now. Just did have a great draft. Hope they play well there. That's the thing. Like, I think they had an unbelievable draft. I think these players will be good players. The question is how quickly and how great the Jets can develop them. Because I feel like the floor is still good with a lot of these guys where they'll at least be good contributors and good players. But the Jets really need them to be superstars. And you also have to look at this now, too, is if you don't believe in Joe Douglas, you at least can say, like, well, he put Zach Wilson in the absolute best position, and there's a lot of pressure on Zach Wilson. Like, I feel if Zach Wilson takes a step, and I'm not saying a giant step, but if he plays competent football where he's not turning the football over, has like a 2-to-1 touchdown ratio, like doesn't even put up sexy stats, I think this team could win 7 to 8 games. I think that's what their ceiling is because a lot of things have to go right. A lot of pieces have to stay healthy. And you also hope that, especially with the first 2 round picks, so the 5 players, you hope that 2 or 3 of them really pop first year. Like, you need, like, if Brees Hall or Garrett Wilson are at one point in the top even 8 for rookie of the year for offensive player, that will be huge for this team. If you have Sauce Gardner, just even this first year, just be a really good number 2. DJ Reed, I feel, is going to be the number 1 corner this year. Just put Sauce out there, let him gain his confidence, let him line up against the number 2 receiver on a team, let him make plays. Like, I don't need him to be an elite corner this first year. It takes time, but what I need him to do is gain his confidence and be able to get adjusted to the game speed. And then Jeremy Rucker, like, if they develop this kid like I believe they can, and I do think that right now it's going to be Uzuma and it's going to be Rucker as the number. I think Conklin's going to be the 3rd string tight end, to be honest with you, especially in the 12 personnel. They have a chance to be really special. I mean, we were thinking coming into this draft, like, for example, like the Jets have not only upgraded talent, like they've really upgraded talent where you can make the case that if they play up to their potential, they could be the number one player on at their position for this team easily. With Gardner at the corner, you can make the case Garrett at the wide receiver position. Although I think him and Elijah Moore will compete, which I think will be fun to watch in training camp this year. And then if Ruckert hits, Jermaine Johnson like just becomes a serviceable edge that's out there, can make 8 to 10 sacks a year, play really great run defense. I mean, this draft could be franchise altering. Now we have to see, like, it's impossible to judge. Like, you can judge on the need and where they got value in this draft. I think that's fair to judge, but we won't get the full scale of a draft till, I know that they say that there's the 3-year rule. I think the 3-year for a final grade, but you get a good sense by the end of the year too. Like, right now, we can get a sense of the 2020 draft. When we'll look back at it as Jet fans, it probably won't be one of our fondest memories. But you look at the way they've attacked this draft, and not only getting great players, but getting players at the top of their position. I mean, in the first 5 rounds, the Jets got arguably the best corner, arguably the best tight end, arguably the best running back, arguably the best wide receiver, and then easily a top 5 pass rusher. But some people believe he's even a better pass rusher than Kayvon Thibodeau. He could be a top 3 edge rusher in this entire draft. And today they attacked it and they got a very valuable piece on really the glaring weakness because, yeah, defensive tackle they need, but they've also added Solomon Thomas. They have interchangeable pieces. Like, they can get away with it inside. I'll be interested to see how the run defense is. But the other thing, too, is they've left positions. Like, I know everyone wanted a great linebacker. I know a lot of people wanted Kobe Dean. But I will also say this, too. Linebacker is a position. Like, I'll talk about the linebacker position because that really, like, of all the complaints about for the Jets, like just looking on Jets social media, the biggest complaint I've seen has been about them not getting an impact linebacker. Now, there's 2 things to this. Number one, if they got a linebacker in this draft, their biggest impact's coming next year. It's not this year because CJ Mosley is going to start this year. And CJ Mosley, yes, is he overpaid for what the type of player he is right now? Yes. But is he still a very good player? Yeah. They believe that they have a really good young emerging linebacker, Quincy Williams, and they mostly play on the field with 2 linebackers. I mean, that's about it. But the other thing, too, is that we have to remember is the Jets have already done this. They've invested in that position. They just happened to do it last year with Jamian Sherwood and Namza Nasruddin, because both of those guys they drafted from the safety position to convert to linebackers. And look, last year was going to be tough. Both of them got also injured early in the season, which hurt their development. But you saw early in the season in training camp, they had athletic ability and they could be something. And it also was going to be a tricky year for them anyways, because we're talking about players that were converting positions. They were going from safety to linebacker. And while they could maybe still be in some packages in a safety position, they were basically learning a whole new position. So not only were they going to the NFL where they had to learn a new playbook, learn a new scheme, and oh, by the way, play against the best players in the world, but you're also changing their position. So going through a full offseason this year at the linebacker position, I believe what the Jets are hoping is one of those two emerge. Whether it's Natural Dean, whether it's Sherwood, just have one of them emerge as like, okay, he can be a good linebacker. Now, there's still a couple of linebackers out there in free agency. The Jets can maybe add Quan Alexander. I know he's been a name that's tossed around. I don't know if that's going to be a possibility. Another name I've seen thrown around is Honey Badger, and I know it would be great to have Honey Badger, but I think Honey Badger would be great for this team. There's just two issues with him. The first one, and to me, this is a big issue, is does he really want to play for the Jets? And at this point in his career, he's won a Super Bowl. Does he want to play? Like, if he wants to be of a mentor and doesn't mind playing on a team that probably isn't going to make the playoffs this year, then he might come here. But if he's strictly looking to be on a playoff team or a team that he feels can compete for a Super Bowl, he's not going to come here. And the other thing, too, is like the linebacker position, I think the Jets have a couple of players that they like in the building with Parks, with Davis, with a couple of these safeties where there's more of the safeties, especially than the linebackers. Like you got Pinnock too. If the Jets can find out of the safety, might be a little bit easier because they have like 3, 4 guys looking as opposed to 2 backup linebackers. But if one of those 4 hits were not even a great safety, but just a safety that's not going to get burned in coverage, that's going to be a solid starting safety that plays good coverage, that breaks up passes, that can be ranging cover sideline to sideline, then the Jets feel like they don't have to invest a premium pick in that position. I mean, we've seen it before with what both Sal and with both Douglas be like. There's value in the safety position, like with Jordan Whitehead. They got a very good safety, but they're not going to overpay for a safety on the back end. They think that they can get it done with cheaper labor and that there's more of a chance to find a player like that. So, especially with the linebacker position, like I know that was one of the big things. Like I kept seeing that people were upset that they didn't get a linebacker. And I could understand the frustration. I mean, I get it. Like this is something to where I also have a feeling too that there's a lot of people in the fan base, and I also get it too, that they like CJ Mosley, but the first 2 seasons of his career have put such a damper on his Jet career that unless he basically played at an all-pro level these last 2 seasons, which at this point in his career, I think he could be a really good, impactful player. But we'll have to see too, because he was also playing after a year not playing last year. Maybe he takes a step back even further this year and plays even better with a better front in front of him. But I do think that a lot of Jet fans, for whatever reason, have basically been trying to write off CJ Mosley. And look, I completely get it. I think a lot of Jet fans didn't love that they gave him a ton of money up front. I don't think a lot of Jet fans, and look, this isn't right, but a lot of Jet fans saw that flash of that game and when he played Buffalo and he looked like maybe one of the best defensive players in football, then gets injured and basically doesn't play the rest of the season. Then you have the 2020 season where he opts out for the entire season. So as a Jet fan, I think there was a lot of frustration. It's like, well, we paid this guy all this money and we've seen him play one game, basically, not even a full game in 2 seasons. It was like, this is like, I kept seeing like one of the worst free agent signings ever in Jets history, god awful guy. Like, look, he played well this year, but it's like I've also said in the last night when I was doing, because I've had a lot of people like they can cut CJ, right? They can move on from CJ if they get a linebacker tonight. I'm like, not really. This is really going to be their last year of CJ because he's going to be, his cap jumps up to 18 million next year, but the Jets can get out of the contract for the $3 million penalty and save 15 million. Right now, no team's going to take that salary. Maybe a team would get desperate at the trade deadline if they desperately need a linebacker, but he's not going anywhere. So the Jets know CJ Mosley is going to be one of their starting linebackers. They have Quincy Williams. It's not one of their biggest needs right now. And I also have a feeling too that Douglas, like part of the reason he addressed these positions too, is like if he's going to take a chance on some of these undrafted free agents, he's probably going to look at maybe trying to find a corner, probably an interior defensive lineman that was overlooked for D tackle. But also, I think he's going to really look at linebacker because there always seems to be a couple linebackers, and linebackers are a really finicky position in the NFL, and we see it all the time. And he even kind of mentioned it, not specifically the linebackers, but in his press conference today, where when he was asked about free agency, he wasn't just talking about this free agency. He's talking about the free agency up until the season starts, which is when you go through teams' camps, you have pro scouts and they're scouting other camps and you're seeing fits. Because there's a lot of teams, like, don't forget, there's 8 new head coaches this year. So there's going to be 8 new teams, at least 8 teams that are changing their scheme. They're changing their wordage. They're changing how they attack. They're changing how they do coverages on defense. And certain players just no longer fit the schemes. And we always see like either talented veterans or players get cut and then go other places. And the Jets are one of these teams that have also been very good at finding cast-offs from teams and being able to implement. John Franklin Myers from the Rams was one of them. And then the other one last year was Quincy Williams. And Quincy, I think, is an unbelievable example that you can find good linebackers. Like if you have a higher percentage of finding a good linebacker undrafted or as a cast-off than you do finding a great offensive lineman or a great receiver or a great quarterback, because a lot of it's the scheme. Like you saw it with Quincy. First year when he was with Robert Saleh in Jacksonville, played in a similar system, looked unbelievable. Then what happened? They changed to the 3-4. Didn't really fit. Wasn't a highly productive player. Fell out of there. Comes back to Robert Saleh. A little bit growing pains, but looked unbelievable and like a playmaker in the system. It really shows like you have scheme. And I hear this comment all the time thrown my way. Well, players shouldn't be scheme dependent. Players shouldn't be scheme dependent. Like there's maybe in a draft, realistically, maybe 5 players where it doesn't matter the scheme. And a lot of it is mostly offense just because they're so dynamic or edge rusher or really playmaker position. But when it comes down to it, scheme is such an important thing. Like we see it all the time. Like how many times have you seen a great offensive lineman pick time in the draft struggle? Well, some of it, a lot of it is the talent, but I would also argue most of it's probably the scheme because we see it so many times where they draft an offensive lineman that they want a quick footed left tackle and they get a guy that really doesn't have that lateral quickness and can't handle the edge, or they want someone that's an absolute road grader as a guard. And look, they're a good guard there, but their skills is being able to pull, being able to move quickly on their feet, being able to seal as opposed to just bullying a 300-pound defensive lineman. So scheme is such an important fit. And because of that, I could see like a team like the Bears with a new head coach. Like there's so many teams with new head coaches where they get through 3 weeks, they look at a guy, doesn't fit us, they let him go. You could potentially pick him up and he becomes a fit for your team. Any other question, guys? Comments in the draft? Again, I give the Jets an A grade for this draft. Absolutely unbelievable. I believe that this was the game-changing draft that a lot of people were expecting. I think it more than delivered. They got great playmakers. And look, if Zach Wilson fails this year, it's not going to be because of the coaching. It's not going to be because of the organization. It's not going to be because of Joe Douglas. For years now with the Jets quarterback, it's been the organization that has failed them. Mark Sanchez, like they gave him great talent early, but then they cut a lot of that talent after year 2 and he went down. Then you saw it with Sam not giving him enough talent. Then you could argue the same with Gene. Like every young quarterback they've brought in, they have failed to give him great talent and ascending talent to work with. Joe Douglas has done that, and he's done it in spades. Like I was talking about the Jets getting another running back in the hopes that they'd get a good compliment to Michael Carter. They end up getting Breece Hall, who could be the best running back and one of the most dynamic players in the draft. And personally, of all these players, I'm actually most excited to see what he can do. I think he's going to be what Elijah Moore was in camp. Like when he gets on the field and gets the ball in his hands, people are going to be wowed at what he can do. I think that he brings the Jets a player that if the Jets play it right and they give him enough touches, we'll see how many touches they give him. But I don't think Garrett Wilson will be in consideration for the offensive rookie of the year because receiving is such a hard thing, especially the adjustments, getting up to speed, playing against these more physical D-backs. But if you were to ask me who has to be one of the favorites for offensive rookie of the year next year that's not a quarterback, Breece Hall has to be at the top of the list because you know the Jets are going to give him the rock. You know they're going to give it to him often, and they're going to want him to make plays. The Jets have added physical tight ends, big tight ends that can help with blocking and Ruckert and all the free agency signings. They have Mekhi Becton, who they hope is healthy and can be an absolute road grader. I mean, they have two really good interior guards. Like they've done a really good job, and I'm really excited. And one thing I want to point out too, because I think a lot of people, especially because I made a Mekhi Becton post, I think it was what, a week and a half ago. I think I seen a lot of people jumping a little bit in on a comment today that Robert Saleh made, and look, I've been critical of Mekhi, but I don't think this is warranted. Like, basically, they were asking about Mekhi, and Salah basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but basically said along the lines of like, yeah, he's training in Houston, in Dallas, everything's good. We've been in communication, but he basically said, "We'd love to have you back here, bro. We take good care of you." But you could tell, like Salah was smiling, like when he made the comments at the Senior Bowl that this is an important offseason, he needs to get shape. He was dead serious. Like you could tell Salah was like dead serious. Like that was really like he meant what he said. Like today was kind of tongue in cheek. It was really, I think it was just kind of a like he understands the situation with Mekhi now. And look, actions to me speak a lot louder than words. If the Jets were that concerned about tackle, and like people are going to say, well, the Mitchell draft proves that they don't believe in Mekhi. I completely doubt that. If Mitchell, to me, like if he has to start 16 games, the Jets might be in trouble. I really like the kid, but he's more of a player that I see them developing and hope he becomes a starter next season. And he's there to be a good backup, and he's there as insurance in case George Fant leaves or one of these tackles doesn't work out next year. So the Jets don't have to necessarily be scrambling for a tackle if they believe in him. But if the Jets really thought that Mekhi was going to be this much of a hindrance, that they weren't confident he was in shape, that they were not confident that he's been putting in the work, that they were not confident that he was going to be ready to go and kick butt in camp, they would take an offensive lineman a lot early, because everything in this draft that they've done, not only to add playmakers, but to make sure Zach Wilson works. If they were that concerned, I guarantee you they would have traded up with that third pick and tried to get an offensive lineman earlier. There would have been no way. Like if they believe that Mekhi is going to be that much of a hindrance, if they're that concerned. Now, again, could it be wishful thinking on their part because they've invested the 11th overall pick in him and they're hoping that year 3 the light goes off and he becomes the dominant player we're all hoping? Absolutely. But actions to me always speak louder than words. What the Jets did today was say, like, look, we believe in our offensive line and our depth. Now, it's interesting to see how they're going to attack it. I still like to get Laurent Duvernay Tardif as a backup. I think I'd like to see him add another interior offensive lineman, for a depth piece. And Douglas smiled too, because they were asking about Morgan Moses, about getting him later. I do think that there is going to be a free agent tackle out there remaining that they could look to target, that is sitting out there that we're not really thinking about, that they can bring in, that is just sitting there at the beginning of camp. And I mean, I'm just looking at the best available right now in terms of free agents. So I mean, Eric Fisher, 31. I think it's just holding out for pay. He wants to probably start though. But if there isn't any nick and injury and he's still available in training camp, he's someone the Jets could obviously look to. There's still a couple of receivers out there, and like Jarvis Landry, I don't know where he's thinking right now. A lot of older tackers, Dwayne Brown, serviceable tackle. I'm not sure if where he is right now. A lot of these guys, you're wondering where they want to play. I mean, Darrell Williams, tackle guard for the Bills. I mean, he's more of a guard and a right tackle than a left. But I mean, he's only 30 years old. He's still on the market. I mean, there's a couple of offensive tackles where if we get to, August, they might just be like, look, I need to at least get on a team so I can get a paycheck because I don't want to sit around. I mean, Riley Reef is one for the Bengals, not a great tackle, but really the Jets are looking for depth. Like they're looking for someone as a backup tackle. Man, they probably still believe in Mitchell. Like that's the reason they gave him money. And I mean, there's still some free agents out there too. I wouldn't be surprised with Keelan Cole with the Jets. I wouldn't be surprised the Jets try to bring him back in that receiver room. They really loved him. They really thought he did an unbelievable job for this team. There's still a lot of guys out there that I could see the Jets like maybe just plugging and looking for. That they're out there. I'm just really curious to see. I think Joe Douglas has a couple guys in mind. I want to trade Fit to move down to 36. That could have been Darian Kinnard. I disagree with that, Kev. From the intel, they were saying that the Texans were at 37. They really loved Hall. There's a chance to get Hall, and Hall would make a lot of sense for them. They don't really have a good running game in Houston, and like you're telling me like go get a fifth round pick. Like I know there's been a couple good offensive linemen that have fallen to the fifth round, but usually for the fifth round, you're best looking for a depth piece. If you have the chance to get the number one running back and what you believe could be a playmaker, I mean, if I was to say like of all the rookies, which one has the best shot to be a Pro Bowl player year one, it's probably Breece Hall for this Jet team because of the amount of usage he'll likely get, but also because of that talent. I mean, Wilson is going to have to deal with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis. I don't think the Jets are going to put a ton on his plate. And there's also a lot of mouths in the passing game with all the tight ends they've added, all the receivers. And look, Michael Carter is obviously going to get his touches, but Breece Hall could be something special. And of all positions, running back is usually the position that you hit the ground the fastest running. And you look at the measurables they put to Breece Hall compared to some of the other grades. The only one on the list that they put up that people might cringe a little bit is Saquon, but we also have to forget too that Saquon had an unbelievable rookie season too. It was the fact that the Giants had zero offensive line and he was getting killed all the time. That's one of the reasons he's gotten nicked up and his career hasn't gone there. Kev, do you think the Giants made a huge mistake not picking Willis in the 60s? Personally, I think they did. It all comes down to I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that room because I do think the ownership group with the Giants, they still like Daniel Jones, but I also think they feel guilty and they need to give Daniel Jones another chance because of the way they've built around him because they had the god awful Dave Gettleman build around him for 3 seasons. It's kind of like, yeah, we feel bad. But it was, and I said coming this offseason, it's like the Sam Darnold situation. The Jets, however, had a better draft, which was beneficial to them. But the Jets also made the decision, like they made a decision and stuck with it. Even the Giants are still kind of, I agree with them not giving him the fifth year option, but it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. And here's the other thing too. I know this is really cliche, but you know the old adage of bird in the hands worth two in the bush. Like everyone keeps saying, "Oh, next year's draft, next year's draft, next year's draft." I mean, there's two really great quarterbacks in next year's draft. I mean, let's be honest. Another one will likely emerge. So, being conservative, there's going to be three great quarterbacks. Um, have you noticed a lot of teams that put a lot of capital in the next year trying to trade up? Uh, they're going to try to get a quarterback next year. I mean, already looking forward to next season, and there's going to be teams that pop up. I mean, Tampa, who I doubt will be able to get there because they're going to be too good with Brady, but that's a team. Carolina, they didn't have any picks this year. I know they drafted Matt Corral, but I don't. I mean, when you draft a guy in the third round, I think that's more of okay. We're crossing our fingers and hoping, but if they're bad, they have an aggressive owner. They're going to want a quarterback. The Saints might want a quarterback. There's so many teams that are going to want. The Eagles basically traded their draft picks to get more picks next year so they could move up and get a quarterback. So you look at the Giants right now, yeah, like you might want a quarterback, but I feel like your team's going to be your hope good enough to win a couple games so you're not in the very bottom. But there's going to be, I feel like 5 or 6 teams that are already thinking about getting a quarterback next year. There's only one problem, guys. There's 5 or 6 of you, and there's only like maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks. So that might be slightly an issue. So like I just feel like they should have taken a shot at Willis. Just because I just have a feeling the ownership group told them not to do that. But I would just take a shot on Willis. What's the worst that happens? Here's a scenario that could have happened this year if you had drafted Willis for the Giants. Daniel Jones gets hurt like he usually does. Willis plays well. Like let's say kind of like Davis Mills, like nothing great, but you know he's good. He's solid. You see, okay, he can play a bit in the NFL. Does he look like a superstar? Maybe not, but you know he's shown something. And the Giants still have a bad season, but they end up with a pick and they end up being in a situation where they can take one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Well, the Giants then have an advantage with Malik Willis, like kind of with what the Texans had a little bit too, if they want to. I don't think they would have gotten much for Davis Mills, but like let's say they had drafted a quarterback this year, they fell in love with the quarterback, they probably could have gotten something for their young quarterback. If Malik Willis played well, you can't tell me there wouldn't be a team that would look and say, well, we still would have 3 years of financial control. And unlike some of these rookies we saw last year could play in the NFL, I think it was a big mistake. The Giants also too, like people, the first night I got some of the compliments for the Giants and their draft. I actually gave them a B plus the first night. People were like, whoa, they had an unbelievable draft. They got Kayvon. Like I said, yeah, but I don't think they thought too well, because my thought was, okay, what the Giants should have done, in my opinion, take Icky first, because I'm 99% sure there wouldn't have been a team that would have traded up to Carolina at 6 to take Kayvon, and I don't think they have great passers. They're not taking Kayvon. I really feel the Giants could have gotten Kayvon at 7, Icky. Now, granted, they still got Evan Neal, the number 2 tackle, but they had the chance to get the number 1 tackle. So I just think that was an incredibly missed opportunity for the Giants. And like I looked at their draft last night, a part of me got what they were doing, because they were saying, look, they want to trade back so they can save some money. And I know they're in cap hell, so fine. But I looked at the players they picked. I think they overdrafted a couple of them. Wendell Robinson, I had a 4th round grade. They took him in the 2nd round before like Alec Pierce. They took him before Sky Moore. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay. And it's weird because he's basically plays the position Kadarius Toney plays, and they're telling us they don't want to trade Toney. But I mean, Joshua Izuda probably will start for them, the guard out of North Carolina in the 3rd round. They had a ton of picks today. They're pretty much done. I mean, they went Micah McFadden, Indiana, okay. Dane Melton, the safety from Iowa, okay. Danielle Bellinger, the tight end from San Diego State. Like, I feel like I always look at like every pick they kind of made. I'm like, I feel like there's a slightly better player. Now, I did like the Darian Beavers pick, the last pick from Cincinnati. I think he's a really athletic kid. But it's kind of funny, too, because not only did they take 2 guards, they took 2 guards from the same school. Izuda they took on round 3, and then tonight they took Marcus McKeithen in the 5th round. So I still would have, if I was them, I still would have kind of tried to get a tackle. Like, I know that they've got the 2 tackle spots pretty much set now with Neal, but I still would have looked for a swing tackle in case either of them has to miss time. And I'm also surprised too that they'd put a lot of work into the running backs. If I was them, I would have drafted a running back. They don't really have a good backup behind Saquon right now, and Saquon hasn't proven he can stay healthy. And the other thing too is they're kind of, I feel bad for Daniel Jones, because the Giants are kind of doing a little bit, and unfortunately, I don't think Joe Douglas meant to do this directly, but he was always criticized for saying he's going to get Sam Darnold weapons, and then he's like, well, you didn't get Sam Darnold weapons. Well, really, he only had 1 draft to do it, and the Jets had so many holes on the freaking roster, they were never going to do it in 1 draft. And I also think they had a coach and a scheme that were not going to work long term. But it does seem like Joe Shane has told everyone, like, we want to believe in Daniel. We want to help Daniel. And look, they've gone, and the offensive line was atrocious. So I have to give the Giants credit where credit is due, that they've gone and tried to upgrade the offensive line, and they have. But I also look at too, and I'm like, there's some really good interior offensive linemen that you passed on. You got him a receiver that's more of a slot guy that would seem like a stretch at the time. This team, like, who's going to play tight end for the Giants next year? I mean, the 4th round they got from San Diego probably, but I just was surprised with some of the picks. To be honest with you, like, I just was surprised with some of these picks from the Giants. I was just looking, and you better hope they hit on them, because it's not only where they pick them. We're watching the picks, and I'm going, okay, like I see who you're picking, but part of me's going, well, I think those players are better for the receiver. I think those, unfortunately, one of my guys who I really was hoping to fall to undrafted, Bo Melton, the kid from Rutgers. I was really praying he would fall. Well, Jets aren't getting help right now because a couple of guys I was hoping follow the undrafted free agency. Tariq Carpenter, the linebacker safety from Georgia Tech, got picked by the Packers at 228. Bo Melton got picked by Rutgers at pick 229 by Seattle. I mean, Seattle's been weird because Seattle, they fixed the secondary. They've done a good job with the running game, but they don't have a freaking quarterback. It's like you guys know Russell Wilson still isn't there, right? You know he's moved on. Like you don't have to necessarily fix the offensive line that much because you didn't do it when he was there for over a decade. I'm just looking to see if any other ones. Andrew Stuber was another one. The offensive tackle of Michigan was a kid I really liked, hoping to fall undrafted. Seeing who's just checking the best who's available right now because that keeps updating throughout this process. But I mean, overall, I don't think I think the Giants had a good draft. Like the Giants just couldn't have a bad draft. And I think they came out, their offensive line was such a problem, and they're probably also hoping, especially with the guards. We know Neal's going to be one of the tackle spots. They're probably hoping that perfect world, both these guards eventually play, but at least one of them is a starter this year. Flout the guy as a corner, but I'm also surprised too because I know James Bradbury, they were talking about trade. They didn't trade him, which I think could have gotten them a draft pick. And Flout is a decent corner, but yeah, I was just looking I'm just going to look at the fourth round where they were really picking because I was surprised. There was some pretty good talent left in the fourth round today. Some guys that slipped through the cracks, especially from the second the day of draft. And I'm like, wait a minute, that guy's still on the board. Every year that always happens, but so just looking here, yeah, Giants are right after the Jets. They took Daniel Bellinger. Just going through some of the guys on the board. Yeah, Brandon Smith, the kid from Penn State, I really liked. I thought that'd be someone they'd be interested in. He went off a couple picks later. Isaiah Spiller was on the board, who's a decent running back. I think would have been a really nice compliment. Pierre Strong, I'm not going to lie, guys, kind of worries me because I had him going to the Jets in the fourth round. I really love this kid. He was the best running back in FCS, and he went to the Patriots. I didn't love the Patriots draft, but that's one of those picks. I'm like, of course, he's going to be like the Danny Woodhead for the Patriots now. I mean, Charlie Collier was from Iowa State was on the board. Charlie Collier, Jake Ferguson, who are better tight ends, were on the board for the Giants, and they passed on them. I don't get it. I'm looking at some of the guys that they could have drafted, and I'm just kind of scratching my head. It's it's funny because the Giants draft, for me after day one, it's okay, they got a good player. I don't think they got a bad player, but where they got him, I'm kind of okay, it seems like a little bit of a stretch. And it seems like positions where it's not okay, you had to stretch because this was kind of the best one available. It was more like you stretched, but there's other guys. I think they're better players. I think they could be a bigger impact. And I feel bad for Daniel Jones because I look at they're limited by what they can do because of the financial restraints, because of the lack of weapons, because of the financial implications around this team. But Matthew Butler was a good player. I really liked John Ridgeway too. But no, I think the Giants had a decent draft. But again, guys, any other questions? Your thoughts or reactions to the draft? I don't think any Jet QB has ever had the amount of weapons Zach. I would make that too. And not only weapons, but weapons you can grow with. I think these are weapons that they're not at their peak. Elijah Moore can get better. Even Corey Davis is at a point in his career. He's the older guy in the room, but he's 28 years old. He still can become even a better player. I mean, they have ascending players. It isn't like they have a 33-year-old wide receiver that's kind of starting on the downturn either. And the other thing with the Jets too is I don't think they're going to ask him to do as much. I mean, last year with Tevin Coleman and Michael Carter, this team, when they stabilized the offensive line, was getting 5 yards a carry. And at one point, they were down to Tevin Coleman and the backups, and they were still averaging over 4 yards a carry. Now you get a really elite number one. I mean, Tevin Coleman now is the third running back on the Jets. He, on most teams, would actually be a decent, good change of pace number two, and he's the third back now. So the Jets not only have running backs, they have depth. They can swap guys out so they're fresh. You're going to see what they do in San Francisco is run the football a lot. They have a good offensive line to run the football. But here's the other thing. about this. It helps protect Zach Wilson, not throw as much, and also makes it more effective because he can take those shots down the field off of play action. But when you look at the quarterbacks in this AFC now, the best defense is to keep them off the field. And you look at the amount of pass rushers the Jets have. If the Jets can somehow get out to a lead and be able to run the clock and then force teams to pass in the second half with that pass rush, that's going to be a tricky combination for teams. Best available college free agent. I still believe the draft's still technically going on. It's almost wrapped up. It's on pick 262. How many picks are there now? Because all the compensation picks now. Just checking really quick to see how many picks are actually left in the draft at this point. It's 654 where I am. So I'm assuming the draft is ending short. Yep, 3 more picks. Both LA teams and San Francisco. I mean, God, do the Rams even have like 2 picks in this draft? Like, I mean, they did, like that must have been like the easiest war room ever. It was just like because even today, I think they had like 4 picks and they trade one for a player. It's like, okay, well, we can go home for the day. It was like the day. What was it? The Saints trade all those picks for Ricky Williams. Like, well, our day's over, guys. We don't have any more draft picks, so we're pretty much done. See you later. But yeah, I'm going to check to see who the best available players are still on the board. I'm just keeping a refresh on this, just to see. Bo Melton was really a kid I was hoping would be there. One player that the Jets have had an eye on. I'm actually going to check really quick to see if he's still on the board. I really don't think a team took him, but that'd be Tasir Mack, the wide receiver from Penn State, because he he was someone like of all the receivers. It was funny actually because they had all the top like 15 receivers for draft day visits to the facility, and like he was the name that stuck out because it's like, oh wait a minute, you're not going to be picked in the first round. So I always laughed that he was there, but nope, Tasir Mack's still there. So I have a feeling he's going to be a priority target for this Jet team because I do think they're done with Denzel Mims. He's a priority free agent probably, but again, 6'2", 198, runs us about a 4.4, highly dynamic player. And I did a great graphic on my last mock draft to him going in the 6th round to them. Like he averages 17 yards per catch, can stretch the field. But the other big thing too is he had a big impact on Pickett because with Pickett, Pickett's QBR with him in the first day game was 83, and his yards per game was, I believe, 344. When he went out the last 5 games, those numbers dropped down. Pickett's QBR was a 73, and his yards per game dropped down to 312. So he did have an impact on it. And one of the teams I was also really interested was the Packers. He seems to fit the scheme, and the Jets were looking for a home run hitter on the outside. If they can get, this is a dynamic playmaker. If they can find him and put him in this roster and he works, I mean, that'd be a great find for this team. There's a lot of great receivers. I mean, every year it just seems like there's always some pretty good receivers that always stick out there. But I mean, you just look at what the Jets think about the last 2 seasons. Like this, these are the drafts the Jets have had. Like not even the 3rd rounders, not even the late rounders. These are the picks they've had. Think about these 7 players for building blocks going forward over the last 2 drafts. Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker, Elijah Moore, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, and Brees Hall. That's excluding the 3rd round picks. That's excluding the Michael Carters. That's excluding the players that they found in the day 3 last year. They're doing a great job. And I would even go so far as to say is like, if Zach Wilson really isn't the guy, I would go this way. I would still say, if you feel like you need to get a new quarterback, if Zach Wilson the answer, that's fine. But I would not fire Joe Douglas because Joe Douglas has done an unbelievable job of not only putting together an unbelievable roster for, especially like we have to remember this is a location too where in the past general managers would overspend on players that really weren't that great. They'd spend N plus money on B players. They also had the problem too where because they've been a bad team for so long, free agents don't want to come here unless you're going to pay them stupid money. But he's done an unbelievable job through the draft, building a good young core. here. Like, I would say this, like, if the Jets, if they get to the end of next season, feel Zach Wilson is the answer, I still like, and I know he picked Zach Wilson, but I would still be comfortable letting Joe Douglas pick another quarterback. I know that's rare. I know that's usually not heard of, but I mean, I've looked at his ability to find talent. And if this draft hits like I believe it could hit, he shows he has a good eye for the game. And look, at the time when they picked Zach Wilson, like life, let's put it this way, life would have been a lot easier if the Jets just got the number one pick in Trevor Lawrence. I mean, let's just be frank. But picking that next quarterback in that draft, and for everyone saying, "Oh, well, Mac Jones looks great." Well, Mac Jones also went to a place where they had a playoff roster and the greatest head coach of all time. And if you noticed, they didn't trust him in big spots, and he did not look good the last 4 months of the season. Now, did he? I mean, we're talking about Trey Lance. Like, I believe part of the reason they're keeping Jimmy G is I don't think they're completely sold on him. And the other guy's Justin Fields. And I understand Justin Fields is a dynamic, unbelievable athlete. And would it probably have worked out better for him in New York right now than Chicago? Sure, because Chicago, like, my God, like what they're doing to Trevor Lawrence, at least like Trevor Lawrence, they're like, okay, well, we'll kind of give you an offensive lineman. We'll get a bunch of defense in this draft. We won't get you playmakers, but we'll give you like Kirk and Sheriff in free agency. It's like we'll give you the knockoffs. But I looked like the first picks for the Bears, and it's like corner and safety. I'm like, are you trying to get your quarterback A, killed with no offensive line, B, no one to throw to? I mean, you do know Allen Robinson's no longer there, right? I mean, seriously, he's gone. But yeah, Tasir Mack is someone I would definitely be keeping an eye on for the Jets. Jojo Doman from the linebacker from Nebraska, really rangy kid. Maybe look at him. Another intriguing prospect for me is Christopher Allen, the edge from Alabama. One of the kid, I had them going him in the 5th round, and I would love this kid, Kellen Diesch, the offensive tackle of Arizona State. I had a 4th round grade on him. Really love his footwork. I actually had him higher than Max Mitchell, and I had the Jets drafting him in the 5th round. He's still out there. He's huge, 6'7", 303 pounds, and kind of like Max, the pass rusher they took in the 5th round today. Older prospect, like 24 years old, but really he's only played the last 2 years. He finally got in there, but he is another guy, really good athlete. I take a shot on him. Then you have Verone McKinley from Oregon. He's still out there too. Look, I know people think he's a dirty player for like he's been labeled out of the Pac-12, but you look like he's got great size, great speed, and he can just whop in. Like Vernon McKinley, like the Jets didn't address safety in this draft. Like if I was the Jets, like my list would probably go McKinley number 1 right now. I think they're going to look hard at Tasir Mack. I mean, Justin Ross, if the medical's clear, he could be an intriguing player, but I doubt they're interested with the spinal fusion. But there's some decent linebackers. Mike Rose from Iowa State. I don't know if he really fits, though, because he's a bigger linebacker. I mean, 6'4", 245 pounds. Probably he's average speeds. I think he will struggle in this system. Probably better as like a strong side linebacker in a 4-3. I mean, he could be something. I mean, look, there's some decent prospects out there. I'm really curious to see who they can maybe get. Guy the Giants really looked at, I don't think the Jets did, was Bryce Watts, this cornerback from Mass. I know they brought him in for a workout, so he's probably one of their priority targets. In terms of defensive tackle, Jaden Peavy from Texas A&M. He's a big body, 6'5", 308 pounds. I mean, he could be just used as like kind of as a run stuffer. I mean, Garrett Prince, I know they've done tight end, but he's a 6'5" tight end out of UAB. Probably my favorite name in the NFL draft that the Jets want to look at another safety, Smoke Monday from Auburn. I mean, is that not the best name in the draft? Oh, wait a minute. Huh. That's an interesting name. Player I really like, maybe not the most athletic, but really smart player. Alec Lindstrom, the center from Boston College. I really like that kid. I think he's a really good kid. And he could be a good backup, and I think he'd be a good guy to maybe try to groom and see. Maybe try to groom and see if he can be the future center after Connor McGovern this next year. There are some decent undrafted free agent players out there. I'm really curious to see. And you make sure you subscribe and check it here because on Monday at 10 o'clock, we're going to go over the players the Jets signed in undrafted free agency, how they could potentially make the roster, their fit for the roster, their role for the roster. I mean, just because the draft's over, now the new fun part of the draft starts. So it's going to be really exciting to see what they do in the undrafted free agency problem. I'm really exciting to see. Wait a minute. This better not be true. I want to check something really quick. I propose draft go 10 rounds. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they'd mind, but if they did that, they'd have to do like a whole week of the draft. Personally, I wouldn't hate that, but yeah, Andrew Stuber going to the Patriots. Oh wow, gotta love Odell. Odell, I was like, Ed did Odell take. He said Tebow Samuel to the Patriots, but apparently a bunch of people said, no, that's not true. I think Debo's just trying to. I mean, sorry, Odell's trying to go to the Patriots. If anything, but nope, the draft is officially in the books. Mr. Irrelevant is Iowa State's Brock Purdy, the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Is he going to be the backup for Trey Lance or maybe Jimmy Garoppolo? We will have to see. But now the fun part begins, undrafted free agency. So again, guys, my thoughts overall, Jets, unbelievable. I talked about it a lot the first 3 days. I said even last night, you had to walk with an A+. I mean, when the Jets walked away with 3 players that are number one at their position in the draft and then get one of the top edge rushers and one of the top tight ends of what I believe it could be the best tight end in the draft sold. And I know a lot of people criticize him for the Jeremy Ruckert pick, and some people are like, oh, they just did because he's a huge Jet fan and everything. Like, look, this system, you want great tight ends, and a young quarterback's best friend's a tight end. This is someone I've been on with Ruckert, and I will be honest, I've shayed away from him the last couple mock drafts I did just because to be honest with you, I would have kept putting Ruckert in the mock drafts. The only reason I didn't over the last 2 was because the only tight end they brought in for the 30 visits was Isaiah Likely. And since he was at the Senior Bowl and because he had a little bit more of a dynamic skill set, like you look at Rucker, like he's the tight end, like in this class, like he does everything well. Like he might not be the fastest tight end, he might not have the best ball skills, but like the combination, like he does everything well. Like everyone has a kind of a big hole in their game. He doesn't. And with likely gave the Jets someone that could stretch the field. And one of the thoughts I had, because he's only like 240 pounds, is I could see them maybe using him as like a hybrid receiver. So that's one of the reasons I leaned away from Ruckert. But I've been saying since the Senior Bowl, like when Ron Middleton talked about him, going like that's someone they really liked. And I believe he's going to be one of the starting 2 tight ends. Like Conklin's a solid tight end, but I think what they realistically, Ruckert's going to be not the number 1 starter, but he's going to be someone that they can. And the nice thing with the depth that they've accumulated, some of these young guys don't have to be the number 1 option day one. Even Garrett Wilson doesn't have to be the number 1 option. Even Sauce Gardner. I mean, the Jets have the advantage where they can bring these guys along. Like if I'm Derek Stingley for the Texans, I'm worried because the Texans, they're not a good team. They're going to put Stingley on the team's number 1 receiver. And if he's getting roasted every week, I think that's going to hurt his confidence. But the Jets at least now can, until Sauce gets up to speed and get comfortable, they can put DJ Reed on the number 1 receiver and screen coverage over to DJ Reed to maybe give some help if it's the number 1 option. For Jermaine Johnson, yeah, there might be a little more pressure if Carl Lawson isn't ready to go, but they have good measure of pass rushers where he doesn't have to be a guy that has to get this team 12 sacks or they're not going to be successful getting to the quarterback. When you look at guys like Garrett Wilson, he doesn't have to be the number 1 option right away. They have Corey Davis on the outside. They have Elijah Moore that's had a year of experience in the system. They have Braxton Berrios, who's been a veteran in this league and is a good gadget guy. So both these guys don't have to, you want them to have a big impact next season, but they can ease them along and help them in their development next year. Like every position that they drafted. I mean, Brees Hall is probably the exception just because I think he's so talented in running backs. You need less of a learning curve. But even today, like the players they got, like they can kind of sit back, and the goal for them is probably not to play a lot this year, but develop and maybe become eventual starters. So I think the Jets hit an absolute home run of the draft. And I think there's some really good, intriguing prospects that happen to still be out there on the board for them that they can go out there and get. I mean, there's a couple good linebackers that weren't drafted. There's a couple of offensive linemen I like that didn't get drafted. There's a couple of safeties I like that didn't get drafted. And there's a couple of receivers. Like, I believe like the Jets are going to take at least one or two receivers. I would say Tasir Mack is someone they are going to highly target out of Pitt. They've been connected to this kid. They brought him in. He was the only receiver they brought in for workout that wasn't a top 15 pick this year. So it tells me that they really like this kid and that they're intrigued by him. They like the dynamic playmaking ability, and they can get him as an undrafted free agency. I think they'll look interior defensive tackle. I think they could look at linebacker, maybe someone that fell out of that they might have had like a fifth or sixth round grade that fell out. And one thing I will say is Joe Douglas every year seems to find some guy in the undrafted period. I mean, the biggest one to me is still Bryce Huff. Like, I will never understand how Bryce Huff, who I thought was at the very least a third round pick, made it to the undrafted free agency period. And unlike regular free agency, the Jets have a bit of an advantage. Even though they've had a ton of depth, some of these undrafted free agencies, like they want to go to a team where they feel they can make a roster. I mean, these undrafted free agents, they're not going to look at like the Bucks. They're not going to look at like, yeah, they're great teams, but since they're so good teams, they probably don't have a really big opening. I mean, if you're a good linebacker prospect, you have a good chance to potentially make this roster. If you're a good interior defensive lineman, you have a chance to make this roster. If you're a safety like McKinley, you might look at it and say, I feel I'm better than Ashton Davis. I feel I'm better than Jason Pinnock. If I go out and ball out in camp, I not only could make this team, but there's a chance I can maybe even earn some playing time or become a starter with this team. I mean, that's just the way it is right now for the Jets. And even like with some of these receivers, yeah, you might not be the number one option, but it's clear the Jets are probably looking for depth pieces right now behind the big guys. And even some of these offensive linemen, like you look at, I know they re-signed Connor McDermott, but some of these tackles might look and say, well, if it's me or Connor McDermott, I have a chance to beat them out. All right, guys. Any questions in the chat? Any undrafted free agents that you would really like? Any players in this draft that you were disappointed? And really, I feel like I don't think anyone was really disappointed. I think some people were disappointed in round 3, but you cannot love the Record family and stuff they posted today about being so excited about being drafted to the Jets. I don't know if there's a third round player you would have rather had, or a player in the 4th round that you really liked that you were disappointed that the Jets didn't go out and get. If there was, please put it in the chat. Again, we'll be back 10 a.m. on Monday to recap the draft and also to look at the undrafted free agency period. But again, guys, it looks like you guys are good in the chat. We'll be back Monday. Have to say, unbelievable draft. Excited to see these young players when they finally take the field. But like for the first time in a long time, it feels good to be a Jet fan. It feels great. You feel excited about this team. And even more than last year, you feel like this team is run by grid people, but you feel like they now have a sense of direction, and it's a good direction, and it's the right direction. So KP wants Justin Ross if the medical's clear, Donovan West or McKinley. I wouldn't hate McKinley either. Again, guys, thank you so much. Make sure to join us Monday morning. We recap the undrafted free agency period. The draft is in the books, and for the Jets, I think it's a game changer. Of course, we'll have to see the players on the field, but for the value they got and for what was anticipated, I think the Jets blew it away. I mean, this has been a draft, like I've said at the beginning. We were looking forward to this draft for a long time. We were looking forward to this draft for we were looking forward to this draft for basically years, and it lived up to the hype. Like, if you were to tell Jet fans what they were going to walk away with tonight, I think people would have said you were crazy, or there's no way the Jets are going to be able to pull that off. But they were able to. Joe Douglas was aggressive. He got great players. He got unbelievable value. He got players that slid down the board. He went up to make sure he got players before other teams could grab them. And even today, like I felt he got guys that are either going to be good role players or guys that have really great potential and high ceilings, which is what you're looking for in the NFL draft. I'm happy. I feel Jets fandom's happy. It was an unbelievable week in Las Vegas. This has been months in the making. Thank you for being here every step of the way with the mock drafts. Make sure to stay here and subscribe for more Jets content as we head toward the regular season. And of course, be here Monday when we talk about the undrafted free agency period. Draft is over, and guys, the Jets, they aced it. A-plus draft for Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. Congratulations to the newest members of the New York Jets family. I know I'm just excited as the rest of the Jets fandom to watch you perform this upcoming 2022 season. All right, guys. Enjoy this draft. Enjoy this weekend. Enjoy this moment. I'm glad you had as much fun as I did, and I am looking forward to, and I cannot wait now for the Jets to kick off the 2022 season.